The silence in the command deck of the Traveler was a physical weight. It pressed on the ears, a low hum of life support, and the distant thrum of the singularity drive the only proof that they were not already a tomb. On the main view screen, the stars were blotted out by geometry. 32 identical alien vessels, shaped like sharpened obsidian arrowheads, formed a perfect sphere of containment around them. They did not hail. They did not threaten. They simply existed, their presence a declaration of absolute finality. This was the end of the line, the end of humanity. Captain Liam's hands rested on the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white but his posture unwavering. Every line on his face, etched by years of impossible decisions, seemed deeper in the stark blue light of the tactical display. He watched the unmoving ships of the Cathar hegemony, their formation so precise it felt less like a military blockade and more like the drawing of a cage. For 6 weeks they had run, a desperate flight across 1,000 light years. But the hunters were patient. Now there was nowhere left to run. "Status report," Liam said, his voice a low command that cut through the tension without shattering it. From the science station to his left, Dr. Aris Thorne answered without looking up from her console. A cascade of light from her screen reflected off her focused eyes, her fingers a blur across the holographic interface. "No change, Captain. The Cathar fleet maintains a static position at a distance of 100,000 kilometers. All weapon ports are closed, but their energy signatures indicate fully charged systems. They aren't preparing to fire. They're prepared to obliterate." Her voice was clipped, precise, stripped of any emotion save for an undercurrent of furious intellectual energy. "Our drive can't build a stable fold with this much gravitational interference. We're pinned." Liam nodded slowly, the movement barely perceptible. Pinned. A simple word for a complex reality. The Traveler was the last human ship, an ark carrying the final 10,000 souls in cryostasis and the pinnacle of their science. Its quantum singularity drive didn't tear through space, it gently folded it, allowing for instantaneous transit without the messy physics of relativistic travel. It was their miracle, the invention that was supposed to save them. Now, it was the reason they were trapped, the very thing the Cathar had hunted them for. He looked from the cold, hard lines of the enemy ships to the soft glow of Aris's station. She had helped build this miracle. Her mind, more than any other, had tamed a singularity and placed it in the heart of their ship. She saw the universe as a series of equations to be solved, and this was one she could not crack. The slight, persistent tremor in her right hand was the only sign of the pressure she was under. "They want the drive," Liam stated. It wasn't a question. "They want the ship," Aris corrected, her gaze finally lifting to meet his. Her eyes were dark, intense. "The drive is the ship. The ship is the drive. They can't have one without the other, and they know it." A grim truth. The Traveler was not a collection of parts. It was a single, integrated system. To remove the drive would be to perform a lobotomy that would kill the patient. Liam's gaze drifted to a small, unlabeled panel on his command console. It was dark, inert, a secret known only to him, Aris, and the ship's core AI. It was their last resort. A theory. A desperate, insane gambit that had only ever been tested in simulations. Simulations that crashed 70% of the time. "The Echo Protocol," he said, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. Aris froze. The constant motion of her fingers ceased. She turned fully in her seat to face him, her expression a mixture of clinical curiosity and stark alarm. "Captain, Liam, we don't know what that will do. The models are inconclusive. It's not a weapon. It's not an escape plan. It's a theoretical expression of the drive's core principle." "It's our last move," Liam countered, his voice steady. He met her gaze, holding it. "They have us boxed in. They will board or they will destroy us. Either way, humanity ends here, in this cold, dark piece of space. I will not let them take our legacy. I will not let the last thing we do be to surrender." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The protocol is designed to collapse the ship's wave function, isn't it? To force every probable location into a temporary physical state." "In theory," she conceded, a frown creasing her brow, "it would create a superpositional cascade. For a few moments, the Traveler would exist in every possible quantum state within a localized field. But the energy required would be catastrophic, and the feedback to the singularity We can't predict the consequences. It could tear the ship apart from the inside out." "And what are the Cathar about to do?" Liam asked quietly. He didn't need an answer. He let his gaze return to the view screen, to the silent, waiting executioners. He thought of the 10,000 sleeping souls in the decks below, their dreams the last repository of Earth's culture, its art, its history. They were entrusted to him. He would not fail them by doing nothing. "Aris," he said, his tone softening slightly, "you gave us a miracle. You gave us a chance. Now I'm asking you to help me use it in a way we never intended. One last defiant act. Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like when it's cornered." For a long moment, Aris was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship around them. She looked at the equations on her screen, a language only she could truly understand. Then she looked back at Liam, at the unyielding resolve in his eyes, a slow nod. The tremor in her hand was gone, replaced by a steady purpose. "The calculations will take 3 minutes to prime. I'll have to bypass every safety interlock we have." "Do it," Liam ordered. His right hand moved, flipping the cover on the secret panel. Beneath it was a single illuminated button. He rested his thumb on its cool surface. "Let's make some ghosts." The 3 minutes it took Aris to prepare the Echo Protocol were the longest of Liam's life. He kept his thumb resting on the activation button, a physical connection to their insane final choice. The command deck remained silent, the tension coiling tighter with every passing second. Aris worked with a ferocious, silent intensity, her hands flying across her console as she dismantled the careful web of safety protocols that kept a miniature black hole stable in the heart of their ship. On her screen, elegant lines of code became a chaotic scrawl of warnings and overrides. "Bypassing primary containment field regulators," she announced, her voice a low monotone. "Disengaging the Heisenberg compensators. The system is fighting me, Liam. It knows this is wrong." "Keep going," he said, his eyes fixed on the Thar fleet. They hadn't moved. They were so confident, so patient. They had all the time in the world, but their time was about to run out. "Quantum state limiters are offline," Aris continued. "I'm routing all non-essential power to the Singularity core. Life support will drop to minimal levels on activation. The cryopods will be unaffected. Their power source is isolated. A small mercy." "Just tell me when," Liam said. "The final sequence is locked in. I'm shunting control to your panel." A single line of bright green text appeared on her monitor. "Echo Protocol awaiting command initiation." She leaned back in her chair, her work done. She looked pale, her face a stark white mask in the glow of the console. "It's ready. On your mark, Captain." Liam took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting thin and metallic. He looked at Aris, offering a small, grim nod of gratitude. She had trusted him. She had placed the fate of their species and the very laws of physics into his hands. He pressed the button. There was no explosion, no lurch of acceleration. For a single terrifying moment, there was nothing. Then reality broke. It was not a feeling of movement, but of profound dislocation. Liam felt his body being stretched and compressed simultaneously, his consciousness smeared across an infinite canvas. He was in his chair, and he was also standing by the view screen. He was in the engine room, feeling the raw power of the Singularity, and in the cryo bay, walking among the sleeping thousands. 1,000 different sensory inputs flooded his mind at once. The taste of ozone, the smell of hot metal, the sound of 1,000 overlapping conversations, the sight of the Cthar fleet from every conceivable angle. The ship screamed, not with an audible alarm, but a deep structural groan that resonated in his bones. The lights flickered, died, and then flared back to life, their colors shifting through the entire spectrum. Through the view screen, the unmoving Cthar ship seemed to shimmer and distort as if viewed through a heat haze. On the bridge of the Cathar command vessel, Admiral Vorlag stood before his own view screen, his 4 slender arms crossed behind his back. The Cathar were a species defined by logic and order. Their technology, their tactics, their very society was built on the predictable, repeatable laws of the universe. The human ship, the Traveler, was an anomaly, a prize to be contained and studied. It had been cornered, its fate sealed. Then it vanished. For 0.7 seconds, the space where the human vessel had been was empty. Vorlag's 2 primary eyes narrowed. A sensor officer, its voice a series of precise melodic clicks, reported the obvious. Target has disappeared from all sensor readings. No FTL signature, no energy discharge, it is gone. Vorlag did not have time to process this impossibility before reality reasserted itself with a vengeance. The empty space did not just repopulate, it bloomed. Where there had been one human ship, there were now 32. They were not arranged in a random cluster. They formed a perfect three-dimensional attack formation, a Thalesian sphere, a complex geometric pattern that placed a vessel at every key tactical point around the Cathar zone formation. It was a textbook maneuver, one the Cathar themselves used, but to see it executed instantaneously by a single ship becoming a fleet was not just tactically shocking, it was a violation of reason. The sensor officer let out a series of discordant clicks, the Cathar equivalent of a gasp. Admiral, I have 32 targets, all identical, all matching the Traveler's energy signature, all solid. Vorlag stared, his logical mind struggling to find a framework for what he was seeing. This was not a hologram. Holograms did not have mass signatures. This was not a trick of light and shadow. Each of the 32 ships was a hard, physical object. He could see the running lights on their hulls, the faint shimmer of their shields. He had surrounded one ship. Now, he was the one who was surrounded. A wave of confusion and disbelief washed over the Cathar bridge. Their rigid command structure, built on predictable threats and logical responses, faltered. How could they fight an enemy that could multiply at will? Which one was the real one? All vessels, Vorlag commanded, his voice tight with a new, unfamiliar emotion. Target the nearest human ship. Fire at will. It was the wrong order. He knew it the moment he gave it. But it was the only logical command he could think of. And as the Cathar fleet began to power its weapons, the 32 human ships opened fire as one. The battle was not a battle. It was a symphony of destruction conducted by a single multi-bodied mind. The 32 echoes of the Traveler fired in perfect, impossible unison. Beams of coherent energy, lances of plasma, and swarms of kinetic projectiles erupted from every point of the Thalesian sphere simultaneously. There was no opening salvo, no warning shot. There was only a sudden, overwhelming storm of coordinated violence. For the Cathar, it was chaos. Their tactical doctrine was based on concentrating firepower on a singular, high-value target. Now they had 32 high-value targets, each one attacking a different Cathar vessel from an optimal angle. A ship that turned to engage the Echo on its port side was instantly struck from its starboard, its dorsal, and its ventral vectors. Targeting computers designed to track and prioritize individual threats were flooded with identical, simultaneous data streams, causing cascading system errors. On the Prime Traveler, Liam gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles bone white. The experience was a sensory nightmare. He was not just watching the battle on the view screen, he was living it from 32 different perspectives. He felt the phantom recoil as cannons on an Echo 10,000 kilometers away fired. His vision flickered, showing him the fiery blossom of a Cathar shield collapsing from a viewpoint directly above the enemy ship, then instantly snapping back to his own bridge. Data flooded his console, tactical overlays from every Echo, all updating in real time, a torrent of information that should have been incomprehensible. But it wasn't. Somehow, through the quantum entanglement of the Echo protocol, his mind, and Aris's and the ship's AI, were networked. They were one consciousness piloting a fleet. He saw a Cathar destroyer's weapon charging, and without a conscious thought, an Echo positioned behind it fired a disabling shot at its power coupling. The thought, the action, and the confirmation of success happened in the same instant. Aris, status, he yelled over the cacophony of alarms that were now blaring for real. The singularity is unstable, but holding, she yelled back, her face beaded with sweat. She was fighting a different battle, wrestling with the fundamental forces of the universe to keep them from tearing their own ship apart. The Echoes are physically real, but they're quantum duplicates. They have mass and energy, but they're drawing it all from our prime core. Every shot they fire drains us. We have maybe 90 seconds of this before the core collapses. 90 seconds, an eternity and no time at all. Liam's mind raced, processing the battlefield with the unnatural clarity the Echo had given him. The Cathar fleet was in disarray. Their rigid formation was broken, ships firing wildly at the nearest ghosts, some even hitting their own vessels in the crossfire. They had a clear path. He focused his intent, a command that was not spoken but simply willed across the quantum network. Concentrate fire on the central axis, clear a path, disable, do not destroy. We are not murderers. The 32 travelers shifted their attack pattern as one. The storm of fire converged, not on the Cathar command ship, but on the vessels directly in their path. Shields buckled and failed, engines overloaded, blossoming into silent, brilliant bursts of light. The Cathar ships were not ripped to pieces, but surgically disabled, left crippled and adrift. In seconds, a corridor of empty space was carved through the enemy fleet. "The path is clear," Aris shouted, "but the feedback loop is intensifying. The echoes are starting to degrade." Liam could feel it, a strange tingling sensation at the edge of his perception. The phantom sensory inputs were becoming distorted, staticky. Through the view screen, the echoes at the farthest edge of the formation began to flicker, their forms becoming translucent. Their time was up. "Disengage the protocol," Liam commanded, his voice raw. "Prepare for immediate FTL jump the moment we are one again." "Disengaging now." Aris slammed her hand down on her console. The world snapped back into place with a violent, gut-wrenching lurch. The 31 phantom ships dissolved into motes of shimmering light, their energy cascading back towards the Prime Traveler. The sensory overload vanished, leaving behind a throbbing headache and the smell of burnt ozone from a fried console. The command deck was plunged into a half-darkness, lit only by emergency lighting and the red glow of warning signs. They were one ship again, alone. But they were not in a cage. Before them, the view screen showed a clear path to the stars, littered with the disabled, drifting hulks of the Cathar fleet. They had done it. They had faced a superior force and had won, not through brute strength, but through a feat of science so profound it bordered on magic. A wave of triumphant, giddy relief washed over Liam. He let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. They were alive. Humanity was alive. "Get us out of here," he breathed. "Plotting the jump now," Aris said, her voice trembling with exhaustion and exhilaration. "Drive is stabilizing, barely." But as she spoke, a new alert flashed on her screen. It wasn't from their own ship. It was a high-priority encrypted broadcast leaking from the Cathar command vessel. Its transmission strength was off the charts, a desperate, panicked scream into the void. Liam's brief moment of triumph evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of dread. He looked at the Cathar flagship, still intact, and saw it was not turning to pursue them. It was reorienting its remaining functional ships to form a new wall, a wall facing them. "Aris," he said slowly, "what are they saying?" The euphoria of their victory vanished as quickly as it had come. The command deck, moments before a place of triumph, was now thick with a new, unsettling tension. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, making the space feel cramped and dangerous. The red warnings on the consoles pulsed like angry heartbeats. In the silence, the intercepted Cathar transmission was a persistent, nagging chime. "I'm trying to break the encryption," Aris said, her earlier elation completely gone, replaced by her usual focused intensity. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, coaxing the ship's strained computer to unravel the alien signal. "It's a high-level military codec, layered. Whatever it is, it's meant for their high command only." Liam stood up from his chair, his legs unsteady. He walked to the main view screen, placing a hand on the cool, vibrating glass. Outside, the scene made no sense. They had won. They had a clear escape route. Yet the surviving Cathar ships were not retreating or regrouping for another attack. They were desperately maneuvering, ignoring the Traveler entirely, moving to blockade the very escape lane they had just blasted open. They weren't trying to keep them in anymore. They were trying to keep them from going out. "Their behavior is illogical," Liam murmured, thinking aloud. "We dealt them a crippling blow. Their priority should be self-preservation or vengeance. Instead, they're building a wall. Why?" "Maybe they're trying to prevent us from reaching a specific destination," Aris suggested, not looking up from her work. "A Cathar military outpost? Their home system?" "No," Liam shook his head. "That vector is empty. Navigation charts show nothing for 1,000 light-years in that direction. It's just open, unclaimed space. He stared at the Cathar ships, at their frantic, desperate movements. This wasn't a strategic maneuver. It was an act of panic. The kind of panic you see when you're trying to contain a plague. A sudden, violent shudder ran through the traveler, throwing Liam against the view screen. A shower of sparks erupted from a ceiling conduit. "Report," Liam snapped, pushing himself upright. "It's the drive," Aris called out, her voice tight with alarm. "The singularity isn't settling back into a stable state. The echo, it left a resonance, an instability in the core. I'm trying to dampen it, but the energy fluctuations are off the charts." On her monitor, a holographic model of the singularity, normally a perfect, placid sphere of black, was now flickering erratically, its edges boiling with phantom energy. It was like a bell that had been struck too hard and was now vibrating itself to pieces. The very heart of their ship was threatening to fail. Another shudder, more violent this time. Liam gripped the back of his chair to stay upright. The ship groaned around them, a sound of tortured metal. The lights flickered wildly, and for a moment Liam thought he saw the walls of the command deck become translucent, a ghost image of the starfield outside bleeding through. The echo was not entirely gone. It was leaving scars on their reality. "I'm losing control of the containment field," Aris cried, her hands a desperate blur. "Then let it go," Liam said, his mind racing. "Don't fight it. Try to guide the energy release. Vent it through the FTL projectors. A controlled burst. Can you do it?" Aris stared at her console, her eyes wide. It was another insane gamble. Venting raw quantum energy into open space was like trying to drain a tsunami with a bucket, but fighting it was failing. "Maybe," she breathed, "if I can synchronize the release with the core's resonant frequency." She began typing, her previous frantic movements replaced by a slow, deliberate precision. The fate of the ship once again rested on her fingertips. As she worked, a sharp, clear tone cut through the cacophony of alarms. It came from her console. "I'm in," she announced, her voice flat. "I've broken the first layer of encryption. It's a log entry from the Cathar Admiral." A text block in the flowing geometric script of the Cathar appeared on the main view screen, with a rapid, crude translation scrolling beneath it. Liam read the words, and the blood ran cold in his veins. "Log entry, Cycle 7-4. The anomaly has occurred. The human vessel, designated Traveler, has enacted a quantum superpositional event, the very contingency we were deployed to prevent. Their ignorance is matched only by their catastrophic potential. They have duplicated the failure of the species designated Extinct 347. The quarantine has been breached." Liam stared at the words, his mind struggling to grasp their meaning. Quarantine? Extinct 347? They weren't a hunting party, they were jailers. "There's more," Aris said, her voice a horrified whisper. She typed another command, and a new block of text appeared. It was a historical file, a red-flagged entry from the Cathar Central Archives. Subject, Extinct 347, a carbon-based species that achieved quantum-level engineering approximately 3,000 cycles ago. Developed a drive system based on localized wave-function collapse. In their hubris, they attempted a fleet-wide superpositional jump. The resulting paradox tore a permanent non-Euclidean wound in the fabric of spacetime at galactic coordinates 77 Gamma 9. From this breach emerged a non-baryonic, extra-dimensional entity that consumes reality itself. The entity is contained only by the constant gravitational pressure of the breach. The Cathar hegemony has maintained a silent quarantine around these coordinates for 3 millennia to prevent any vessel from approaching and destabilizing the wound. The human vessel is now on a direct course for the breach. The command deck fell utterly silent. The hum of the ship, the pulsing of the alarms, the distant groaning of the drive, it all faded away. There was only the text on the screen, a death sentence for a galaxy, written by them. They hadn't won a battle for survival. They had recklessly fired a cannon in a room made of glass, and now they were flying straight towards the hole they had made. The weight of the revelation was crushing, a physical force that seemed to suck the air from the command deck. Every assumption they had made, every action they had taken, was cast in a new, horrifying light. They weren't heroes who had outsmarted a superior foe. They were fools who had kicked down the door to a madhouse, believing it was the exit. Liam felt a wave of nausea roll over him. The pride he had felt just minutes ago curdled into a bitter, burning shame. He looked at the disabled Kethar ships, no longer seeing them as defeated enemies, but as wounded guardians. He saw their frantic, desperate attempt to block the escape vector not as an act of aggression, but as a last-ditch effort to save the galaxy from humanity's ignorance. He had ordered the attack. He had willed the Ghost Fleet into existence. He had celebrated their victory. "The breach," Aris whispered, her face ashen. She was running a new set of calculations, her hands moving with a slow, horrified certainty. "The coordinates from their file, 77 Gamma 9, that's where our jump was taking us, the path we cleared." She brought up a star chart, a three-dimensional map of the sector. A red circle blinked ominously in the empty space they had been aiming for. It had been labeled navigational hazard, unstable gravimetrics in their own charts, a standard warning for an area to be avoided. They had never known what it truly was. "The Echo Protocol," Liam said, his voice raspy. "It didn't just create a temporary fleet. The resonance it left behind, it's drawn to the instability of the breach, isn't it? Like a magnetic attraction." Aris nodded, not taking her eyes off the terrifying numbers scrolling across her screen. "The singularity is trying to stabilize itself by finding a point of similar quantum flux. It's pulling us toward the tear in spacetime. The FTL drive won't just take us there. It will lock onto it like a homing beacon. We can't control it." The ship shuddered again, a deep, resonant groan. The pull was getting stronger. They were being dragged towards the abyss. Liam looked at the 10,000 sleeping souls in the cryobays. He had promised to protect them, to carry the legacy of humanity to a new home. Instead, he was about to deliver them, and possibly the entire galaxy, into the maw of a reality-consuming monster. The irony was a physical pain. In their defiant act of survival, they had become the ultimate threat. He straightened up, the shame solidifying into a hard, cold resolve. They had made this mess. They had to fix it. The arrogance, the pride, the desperate need to win, it had all been a mistake. True human excellence wasn't about proving your strength. It was about taking responsibility for your actions. "The Kethar," he said, his voice regaining its command authority. "They're still out there. Their ships are damaged but functional. They know what we're facing." Aris looked up at him, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding of what he was implying. "You can't be serious. They'll destroy us without a second thought." "They didn't destroy us the first time," Liam countered. "They tried to contain us. They were trying to protect us from ourselves. Their objective hasn't changed. Only now, we're all on the same side." He walked back to his command chair, his steps firm, his purpose clear. "Open a channel to the Kethar flagship, all frequencies, unshielded, unencrypted, full broadcast." "Captain, that's suicide," Aris protested, rising from her seat. "They'll see it as a trick, a final act of human deception." "Then we'll have to show them the truth," Liam said calmly. He sat in his chair, the familiar weight of it a small comfort in a universe that had just turned upside down. "Put their log entry on the main screen, the one we just decrypted. Send it to them. Show them that we know. Show them that we understand the mistake we've made." Aris stared at him, her mind, so used to the cold logic of physics, struggling with the sheer, audacious humanity of the plan. It was illogical, it was irrational, it was an appeal to an enemy's better nature, an enemy that had shown no indication of having one. But it was also the only move they had left. With a deep, shaky breath, she returned to her console. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed in the commands. "Channel open, broadcasting on all frequencies, sending the data packet now." On the view screen, the image of the Kethar fleet wavered. A new window opened, a direct visual link to the bridge of the alien command ship. Admiral Vorlog stood there, his form rigid, his two primary eyes burning with a cold analytical fury. Behind him, his bridge crew worked with frantic haste, their movements betraying their panic. For a moment, the two commanders simply stared at each other across the void. A human and a Kethar, representatives of two species on the brink of a galactic catastrophe. The silence was absolute. Then Liam leaned forward, his face filling the screen, his expression one of profound, unshielded sincerity. "Admiral Vorlog," he began, his voice steady and clear, broadcast to the entire Kthar fleet. My name is Captain Liam. I command the human ship Traveler. We have made a grave error." Admiral Vorlag's reaction was not what Liam had expected. There was no flicker of understanding, no hint of recognition. His posture remained rigid, his gaze as hard and unforgiving as polished stone. The data packet containing the Cathar's own log file was displayed on a screen behind him, yet he gave no sign that he saw it or that its meaning registered. To the Cathar, human words were just noise, human actions just chaos. "Your transmission is acknowledged, human," Vorlag's voice echoed on the Traveler's bridge, a series of precise, emotionless clicks translated into sterile text. "Your chaotic energy discharge has ceased. Your vessel's trajectory remains a primary threat. Cease your advance immediately, or we will be forced to employ terminal measures." The surviving Cathar ships began to move, their damaged forms pivoting with a slow, deliberate grace. Their weapon ports, which had been closed, now slid open. They were no longer trying to form a wall. They were forming a firing line. Their desperation had curdled into deadly resolve. They would not risk letting the Traveler get any closer to the breach. If they could not stop it, they would destroy it, even if it meant annihilating the very prize they had been sent to retrieve. "They don't believe us," Aris said, her voice barely a whisper. "They think it's a trick." "Logic can be a prison, Aris," Liam replied, his eyes never leaving Vorlag's. "They can't conceive of an enemy admitting a mistake because, in their experience, enemies don't. We have to show them." He ignored the Admiral's ultimatum. He knew that any attempt to turn the ship or power down their systems would be futile. The pull from the breach was too strong now, a relentless, invisible tide dragging them towards damnation. The ship's drive was the source of the problem, and also their only potential solution. "Aris, the drive," Liam said, his mind working furiously. "The resonance. You said it was pulling us toward the breach. Can you reverse it? Can you use the resonance to push us away?" Aris shook her head, her expression grim. "No, it's a fundamental quantum attraction. To reverse it would be like trying to reverse gravity. But—" a flicker of an idea sparked in her eyes. "I might be able to modulate it, not reverse it, but change its frequency. If I can create a counter-resonance, I might be able to slow our acceleration. Fight the pull. It would put an incredible strain on the singularity. It might even be more dangerous than the Echo was." "Do it," Liam ordered without hesitation. "Buy us time." He turned his attention back to the view screen, to the impassive face of the Cathar Admiral. "Admiral, I repeat, we understand the nature of the quarantine. We had no knowledge of the entity at galactic coordinates 77 Gamma 9. Our actions were born of ignorance, not malice. We are not your enemy." As Aris worked, a low, deep hum began to fill the ship, a vibration that seemed to come from the very atoms of the hull. The ship's slow, inexorable drift towards the breach began to slow, the acceleration fighting against itself. On the tactical display, their projected course line, which had been a sharp curve into the red danger zone, began to flatten out. They were still moving forward, but they were no longer careening out of control. They were fighting it. This action, this clear defiance of the physical pull towards the breach, was a statement the Cathar could not ignore. It was data. It was logic. An enemy trying to reach the breach would not be actively fighting against the force that was pulling it there. On the Cathar bridge, a sensor officer let out a series of sharp clicks. "Admiral, the human vessel is firing its FTL projectors, but they are not generating a fold. They are creating a counter-gravitational wave. They are actively resisting the pull of the anomaly." For the first time, a flicker of something, uncertainty perhaps, crossed Admiral Vorlag's face. His two primary eyes narrowed slightly. The human's actions contradicted their trajectory. This was a logical inconsistency, and logical inconsistencies required analysis. "Hold your fire," Vorlag commanded. The glow from the Cathar weapon ports dimmed. "Maintain firing solutions, but do not engage." He stared at Liam, the silence stretching between their two ships. The humans were broadcasting Cathar top-secret historical files. They were speaking of mistakes and ignorance, and they were actively fighting the very force that made them a threat. It was a puzzle, and Vorlag's mind was built to solve puzzles. The real enemy was not the human ship. The real enemy was the silent, waiting abyss they were both drifting towards. A new, terrifying thought began to form in Vorlag's mind. What if the humans were not the problem? What if, in their chaotic, unpredictable way, they were the solution? Human Captain, Vorlag's voice came again, the tone subtly different, less accusatory, more analytical. Your vessel's quantum drive is the source of this instability. It is the only known technology in this galaxy that resonates with the breach. Explain the nature of your countermaneuver. A door had opened, a small one, but it was there. Liam knew this was their only chance. They had to bridge the gap between human intuition and Cathar logic, and they had to do it now. My chief engineer will explain, Liam said, gesturing towards Aris. She is the architect of the drive. She understands it better than anyone. He was putting the fate of their species and their last, desperate hope for an alliance in Aris's hands. Aris felt a surge of adrenaline as Liam put the focus on her. All her life, she had communicated through mathematics, through the pure, clean language of equations. Now she had to translate the most complex physics in human history into a concept that a rigid alien mind could accept as logical. She had to build a bridge of trust with an enemy, using only the blueprints of a technology that had almost doomed them all. Taking a deep breath, she moved to the center of the command deck, positioning herself directly in front of the comms pickup. She looked at the image of Admiral Vorlag, not as an enemy, but as a fellow scientist facing a catastrophic problem. "Admiral," she began, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the fear that was churning in her stomach. "My name is Dr. Aris Thorne. The drive system of the Traveler operates by creating a contained, stable quantum singularity. The Echo Protocol, our regrettable action, was an uncontrolled collapse of the singularity's wave function. It forced a state of quantum superposition, but left a residual harmonic resonance in the core." She brought up a simplified schematic of the drive on the main screen, a glowing sphere surrounded by complex energy conduits. This resonance is what is causing the attraction to the spatial tear. The tear itself is a macro-scale quantum event, a wound in spacetime. Our drive is being pulled towards it like a compass needle to a magnetic pole. On the Cathar bridge, Vorlag listened, his head tilted slightly. His science officers were analyzing her words, her schematics, comparing them to their own limited understanding of the extinct 347's technology. "The counter-maneuver you are observing," Aris continued, her confidence growing as she spoke of her work, "is not a reversal of this attraction. That is impossible. Instead, I am generating a secondary asynchronous resonance within the singularity. Think of it as two interfering sound waves. By carefully tuning the frequency of the second wave, I can create destructive interference, partially canceling out the primary resonance that is pulling us forward. It is not a solution, it's a temporary break, and it is tearing our drive apart." She highlighted the stress fractures appearing on the schematic, the angry red lines of energy feedback that threatened to shatter the entire system. She was laying their weaknesses bare, showing the Cathar just how desperate their situation was. It was a move of complete transparency, a concept alien to the guarded, secretive Cathar. Vorlag was silent for a long time. The logic was sound. The data was consistent with their observations. The human scientist was not boasting or threatening. She was explaining with a clarity and depth that spoke of absolute mastery of her field, and she was admitting the limitations of her own technology. This was the most compelling evidence of all. "Your brake is failing," Vorlag stated, his tone now purely analytical. "Our sensors indicate your velocity is increasing again. You have, by our calculations, less than 1 hour before you reach the breach's event horizon." "We are aware of that, Admiral," Liam interjected, his voice calm and firm, "which is why we need your help." Another silence. The request was so audacious, so contrary to every protocol of Thar military doctrine, that it seemed to momentarily stun the alien commander. "We are a quarantine fleet, Captain," Vorlag said slowly. "Our mandate is to contain or destroy threats to the galactic stability. Your vessel is that threat. Our vessel is also the only tool in this galaxy that can interact with the breach on a quantum level," Liam countered, pressing the advantage. "You have guarded this wound for 3,000 years. You have watched it, studied it, but you have never been able to close it. We can, together." This was the final gambit. Not just an alliance to survive, but an alliance to solve the problem. To finish the job the Cathar had started 3 millennia ago. Aris's eyes widened. She looked at Liam, a silent, frantic question in her gaze. Close it? How? Liam gave a minute shake of his head, a signal for her to trust him. The idea was a seed of pure, radical logic that planted itself in Vorlag's mind. The humans were not just a threat, they were a unique variable, a variable that could potentially change the entire equation. The quarantine was a static solution to a dynamic problem. It was a bandage, not a cure. For the first time in 3,000 years, a cure might be possible. Specify your proposal, Vorlag commanded. Dr. Thorne believes she can reverse the principle of the Echo Protocol, Liam said, improvising on a foundation of pure hope and his faith in Aris's genius. Instead of an explosive superposition, she can create an implosive one, a controlled, focused collapse of spacetime that could pull the edges of the tier together, sealing it permanently. But we do not have the power. Our drive is failing, and we do not have the knowledge. You have 3,000 years of data on this anomaly. We need that data, and we need a massive, focused energy source to power the attempt. He paused, letting the full weight of his proposal sink in. We need your ships, Admiral. We need you to channel the power of your fleet into ours. The command deck of the Traveler was silent. The command deck of the Cathar flagship was silent. An entire battlefield held its breath. It was an insane request, built on a theory that hadn't even been formulated yet. But in the face of a common existential enemy, insanity could sometimes be the only logical path. Admiral Vorlag looked from the human captain's earnest face to the terrifying silent void on his star chart. He had a choice: adhere to his ancient mandate and destroy the human ship, leaving the quarantine forever in place, or embrace a chaotic, unpredictable, but potentially galaxy-altering new path. Dr. Thorne, Vorlag said, his gaze shifting to Aris, begin transmitting the theoretical framework for this implosive superposition. My science team will analyze its viability. We will render our decision shortly. He cut the visual link. On the bridge of the Traveler, Liam and Aris looked at each other. Aris's expression was one of pure, unadulterated terror. Liam, what have you done? She whispered. An implosive superposition. That's not a real thing. I have no idea how to even begin to calculate that. You will, Liam said, his voice soft but filled with an unshakable confidence. You're the smartest person I've ever known, and now you have the Cathar's entire library to work with. Get to it, Doctor. The alliance was born not of trust, but of shared desperation. The Cathar, after a tense period of analysis, had agreed. Their logic dictated that the potential reward, the permanent sealing of the breach, outweighed the risk of trusting the volatile humans. The alternative was the status quo, an eternal, draining vigil that could fail at any moment. What followed was an unprecedented, frantic collaboration between two species who had been trying to kill each other less than an hour before. The Cathar flagship transmitted its entire 3,000-year archive on the breach, a torrent of data that would have taken human scientists decades to parse. But Aris, aided by the Traveler's AI and the focused, analytical minds of the Cathar science team, devoured it. The bridge of the Traveler transformed into a chaotic, interplanetary laboratory. Aris stood at her station, a holographic display of complex, shifting equations surrounding her like a cage of light. She was in constant communication with the lead Cathar scientist, a being identified only as primary analyst. Their conversation was a rapid-fire exchange of quantum mechanics, topology, and theoretical physics, a language that transcended species. Your data shows a consistent chronon decay at the perimeter of the tear, Aris transmitted, her fingers flying as she adjusted her models. This implies the breach isn't just a spatial wound, it's a temporal one as well. It's leaking time. The observation is correct, came the translated reply from primary analyst, its voice a calm, melodic series of clicks. Our models failed to account for the temporal dimension. We classified it as anomalous energy fluctuation. Your insight is valuable. For a Cathar, this was the equivalent of effusive praise. Liam watched from his chair, a silent observer to this historic meeting of minds. He was a soldier, a captain. The science was beyond him, but he understood the stakes. He managed the physical part of the alliance, coordinating the delicate dance of their two fleets. The Cathar ships, their forms still bearing the scars of the battle he had ordered, moved into a precise formation around the traveler. They extended energy conduits, glowing umbilicals, that would pour the power of their reactors into the human ship's failing heart. The plan they formulated was terrifying in its audacity. Aris, using the Cathar data, had designed what she called a quantum suture. It was, as Liam had gambled, a reverse echo. Instead of creating multiple external states of the traveler, it would create multiple internal, overlapping states, all focused inward on the singularity. This would generate a brief, hyper-dense gravitational point. The idea was to place the traveler at the exact center of the breach and detonate this gravity bomb, pulling the torn edges of space-time together and forcing them to fuse shut. The cost would be immense. The procedure would require channeling the full power of the entire Cathar fleet into the traveler's singularity, overloading it to a degree that was far beyond its design specifications. The chances of the traveler surviving the resulting feedback were, as primary analyst coolly calculated, less than 17%. "It is the most logical course of action," Vorlag stated via comms, his voice betraying no emotion at the death sentence he was delivering. "The potential destruction of your vessel is an acceptable loss when weighed against the permanent sealing of the breach." "We understand, Admiral," Liam replied, his own voice equally steady. He looked at the faces of his bridge crew, their fear masked by a quiet, determined professionalism. He looked at Aris, who was so deep in her work she seemed to have forgotten the danger, her face lit with the fire of pure discovery. They were all prepared to pay the price. The 10,000 souls in cryostasis would be their legacy, a final silent testament to a species that had reached for the stars, made a terrible mistake, and then sacrificed everything to fix it. "Aris, what do you need from me?" Liam asked, his voice low. "Time," she said without looking up, "and a steady hand. The final sequence is incredibly delicate. I have to manually align the resonant frequencies of all 32 Thar power cores with our singularity. One mistake and we'll detonate prematurely." "You have it," he promised. The joint fleet, a strange collection of human ingenuity and alien logic, began its final, slow approach towards the breach. As they drew closer, the very nature of space began to warp. The starfield ahead of them seemed to bend and twist around a point of absolute perfect blackness. It was not the black of empty space, which was filled with faint light and distant stars. This was a hole in reality itself, a patch of nothing that consumed light, energy, and hope. A halo of distorted, shimmering light, like a heat haze, surrounded it, the visual evidence of the temporal decay Aris had identified. It was the most terrifying and mesmerizing sight Liam had ever witnessed. The ship's systems began to protest. Proximity alerts screamed, navigational sensors failed, and the hull groaned under the strain of the tidal forces. Inside the command deck, the lights flickered, and for a brief, nauseating moment, Liam saw a ghostly afterimage of Aris at her console, a half-second echo of her past self. The wound in space-time was bleeding into their ship. "We're approaching the optimal position," Vorlag's voice announced. "Prepare to initiate the energy transfer." Aris looked up, her work complete. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear and resolute. "The sequence is locked in, Captain. It's ready." Liam nodded, taking one last look at the starfield behind them, a silent farewell to the universe they knew. He then turned his gaze forward to the abyss they were about to challenge. "Admiral Vorlog," Liam broadcast, his voice ringing with a calm finality, "on behalf of the human race, it has been an honor." The final moments of the approach were an exercise in controlled terror. The traveler, tethered to the Cathar fleet by shimmering beams of raw energy, was a fly being dragged into the heart of a spider's web. The breach loomed before them, no longer a distant anomaly on a star chart, but a dominant physical presence that filled the view screen. The absolute blackness of its center seemed to pull at the eye, a void that promised utter annihilation. Inside the command deck, the temporal distortions grew more frequent. A coffee mug on a side console appeared to slide to the edge and fall, only to reappear where it started, caught in a microloop of time. The crew saw fleeting, ghostly images of themselves in the periphery of their vision, echoes of their own immediate past and future. It was profoundly disorienting, a constant reminder that the fundamental laws of the universe were breaking down around them. Liam kept his focus locked on the Cathar flagship, his anchor in the swirling chaos. His hands were steady on the arms of his chair. He had made his peace with the probable outcome. His only concern now was a clean execution. He would not allow their final act to be a clumsy one. All Cathar vessels confirm energy conduits are locked and synchronized, Admiral Vorlog's voice reported, a point of solid logic in the sea of madness. We are prepared to transfer power on your command. Dr. Thorne, are you ready? Liam asked, his voice quiet. Aris stood at her station, her body swaying slightly as the ship groaned under the tidal stress. She had pushed her holographic display away. The calculations were done. The theory was complete. All that remained was the act itself. Her eyes were fixed on the Singularity Core monitor, a seething, unstable ball of energy that was about to become the focal point for the power of an entire fleet. The quantum suture is primed, she confirmed, her voice tight but controlled. Once we begin, the process will be irreversible. The Singularity will either collapse space-time, or it will collapse itself, taking us with it. There will be no middle ground. Understood, Liam said. He looked around the bridge at the handful of officers who formed his command crew. They met his gaze, their faces pale but their expressions resolute. They were the last active remnants of the human race, and they were about to perform an act of cosmic surgery. There was no fear in their eyes, only a profound, shared sense of purpose. They were no longer fighting for humanity. They were fighting for everything. Liam opened a ship-wide channel, his voice reaching every section of the silent sleeping vessel. This is Captain Liam. To the crew, to the 10,000 souls we carry, we were given a mission to find a new home, to preserve the light of our species. Today, our mission has changed. We have a chance to give a gift to the galaxy, a gift of security and stability, to ensure that no other species suffers the fate that befell Earth. It is a heavy price, but it is a worthy one. Whatever happens next, know that humanity's final chapter was not one of defeat, but of sacrifice. We did not simply fade away. We chose to mend what was broken. He closed the channel, the silence that followed heavier than before. Admiral Vorlag, Liam broadcast to the Allied fleet. We are in position. Begin the energy transfer. Acknowledged, traveler, Vorlag replied. May your logic be sound. The universe outside the view screen turned white. The 32 energy beams connecting the Cathar ships to the traveler intensified, changing from faint shimmers to solid, blindingly bright lances of pure power. The hum of the ship's drive rose in pitch, climbing from a low groan to a piercing high-frequency scream. The entire vessel shuddered violently, as if it were a bell being struck by a colossal hammer. On Aris's console, the Singularity's energy levels skyrocketed past every safety limit, the numbers climbing into ranges she had previously considered purely theoretical. The black sphere on her monitor began to glow, first a dull red, then a brilliant, searing blue-white. Power transfer at 100%, Aris shouted over the deafening shriek of the drive. The core is saturated. The containment fields are failing. We have seconds. The temporal distortions reached their peak. The command deck became a flickering chaos of overlapping moments. Liam saw the Cathar fleet simultaneously in front of him and behind him. He saw Aris at her console and also standing beside him, her hand on his shoulder, a sad, proud smile on her face. The past, present, and future were converging on this single final point. He gripped the arms of his chair, the cold metal the only thing that felt real. He looked directly into the heart of the breach, into the absolute nothingness, and felt not fear, but a strange sense of peace. They had run so far, only to find their true purpose here, at the end of all things. Aris, he said, his voice calm amidst the storm, execute the suture. Aris met his gaze across the flickering, distorted space. She gave a single, sharp nod. Her hand slammed down on the activation panel. For Earth, she whispered, and then the universe folded in on itself. The moment Aris executed the quantum suture, all sensation ceased. There was no sound, no light, no feeling of implosion. There was only a profound and total absence. The screaming drive, the shuddering hull, the chaotic temporal echoes, All of it vanished into a perfect silent stillness. For an immeasurable moment, the traveler and its crew ceased to exist in any conventional sense. They had become the focal point of a controlled singularity, a pinprick of impossible gravity at the heart of the wound in spacetime. From the perspective of the Cathar fleet, the sight was apocalyptic. The human ship, glowing with the combined power of their fleet, reached the center of the breach and then simply vanished. In its place, the edges of the black, non-Euclidean tier began to move. The fabric of spacetime, torn for 3 millennia, began to pull inward, rushing towards the point where the traveler had been. The shimmering halo of distorted time collapsed, and the two sides of the wound met with a silent, cosmic violence. For a breathtaking second, there was a flash of pure, unadulterated light, the energy of a healing universe, and then it was over. Where the terrifying breach had been, there was now only normal, empty space. The stars, once bent and distorted around the wound, now shone with a clear, steady light. The quarantine was over. The wound was healed. A wave of stunned silence washed over the bridge of the Cathar flagship. The crew stared at their sensors, which were now reporting stable, predictable gravitational readings. The anomaly they had guarded for generations was gone. The melodic clicks of the science officers were hesitant, filled with a sense of awe that bordered on the religious. Admiral Vorlag stood unmoving, his 4 arms held rigidly at his sides. He stared at the empty space where the human ship had made its sacrifice. He had witnessed an act that his logical mind was still struggling to process. The humans, in their chaotic, emotional, and illogical way, had achieved what the Cathar had deemed impossible. They had not just defied the odds, they had rewritten the fundamental equation of the problem. "Report," Vorlag commanded, his voice quiet. "The anomaly is gone, Admiral," Primary Analyst reported, its voice lacking its usual detached precision. "Spacetime is stable. The temporal distortions have ceased. The humans, they succeeded." A long silence followed. The Cathar fleet floated in the newly healed space, their mission complete in a way none of them had ever anticipated. They had won, but the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the magnitude of the sacrifice they had just witnessed. And then a single faint sensor reading appeared. "Admiral," the sensor officer clicked, its voice rising in pitch. "I am detecting a low-energy object at the convergence point. Mass readings are consistent with the human vessel." Vorlag's primary eyes snapped to the view screen. There, in the center of where the breach had been, something was coalescing out of the darkness. It was not a flash of light, but a slow, painful return to reality. The scarred, blackened, and utterly powerless hull of the traveler faded back into existence. It was a ghost ship. Its hull was fractured and scorched, entire sections fused into slag. There were no lights, no energy readings, no signs of life. It was a tomb drifting in the silent void. They had survived the implosion, but the cost had been their heart. The quantum singularity drive was gone, its energy utterly expended in the act of mending reality. On the bridge of the Traveler, emergency power flickered to life, casting the deck in a deep blood-red glow. The air was thick with the smell of burnt electronics. Liam pushed himself up, his body aching as if he'd been torn apart and put back together. He looked around. His crew was slumped in their chairs, unconscious but alive. At her station, Aris was stirring, a low groan escaping her lips. He stumbled to the view screen, which was miraculously still functional. He saw the Cathar fleet holding its position, watching them, and he saw the stars, clear and undistorted. The breach was gone. A single unshielded channel opened from the Cathar flagship. It was a visual link. Admiral Vorlag's face appeared on the screen. For the first time, his expression was not one of cold logic or analytical curiosity. It was something else, something that looked to Liam's weary eyes like respect. "Captain Liam," Vorlag's voice came, the translated text appearing below his image. "Your vessel is without power. Your drive is destroyed. You are stranded." Liam met the alien's gaze. He felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a quiet, unshakable pride. He thought of the 10,000 sleeping souls below, their future now uncertain, but their existence no longer a galactic threat. "We are," Liam confirmed, his voice raspy, "but we are alive, and the galaxy is safe." Vorlag was silent for a moment, the two commanders staring at each other across the void. The Cathar had come to contain a reckless species. They had found an ally and witnessed a sacrifice that would be entered into their historical logs for millennia to come. Humanity had lost its home, its fleet, and its miracle drive. They had nothing left but a single crippled ship. But they had redefined their legacy. They were no longer the desperate fugitives running from their past. They were the saviors who had sacrificed their future for the good of all. Stranded, broken, and alone, they had never been more magnificent. "Your logic was sound, Captain," Vorlag said, a final admission from a being of pure reason. He then cut the connection, leaving the traveler to float in the silent, peaceful dark, its last greatest echo not one of defiance, but of hope.